Is it your belief that we should be increasing our trade with China?
There are partners in Asia that we can build deeper ties. There is certain activity but the partners in Asia that share our values don't include China.
When we think about India and China, my effort there was to put on the table a strategic partnership framework.
Don't include China.
Last night, news broke that Donald Trump terminated all trade negotiations with Canada. It was framed all around the ad that Doug Ford's government took out targeting Americans by invoking former President Ronald Reagan. This morning, we learned that there is a lot more to the story. Last time this happened, Mark Carney needed to give up his digital services tax just to sit back down at the poker table. Question now is what's he going to have to give up this time? Let's take a look. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the announcement which took the internet by storm before it was subsequently deleted. So it's by President Trump. It says the Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. The ad was for $75 million. They only did this to interfere with a decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. You may not like Donald Trump. You may not agree with Donald Trump on some things. But there's one thing that I can point to in this post that actually is right and should be very concerning to all Canadians. What he's talking about in terms of influencing a Supreme Court decision, because there is a case going through the Supreme Court right now as to whether the tariffs that Donald Trump is invoking are actually legal or not. The issue is that we have a Canadian government, in this case the Ontario government, taking out ads to run against American viewers. This could be argued to be foreign interference. At minimum, it's foreign influence. Imagine this. Imagine if Donald Trump took out an ad that was trying to demonize the Liberals and Mark Carney. Can you imagine the outrage across the Liberal-run media and the Liberal government? Just try and picture that for a minute if Donald Trump did that. And here we have the government of the province of Ontario doing just that. That's interesting. So you may not agree with Donald Trump all the time, but he's right. This is actually pretty egregious behavior on the part of a Canadian government, especially while there's a decision going on in the U.S. Supreme Court, because that could serve as political interference in trying to influence the decision on that Supreme Court. So that's a big problem. This isn't just Trump flying off the handle. We don't agree with Trump on a lot of things, but we're objective enough to be able to say that when we do agree with him on things, and this is one of them. May not like how he communicates, but the point is sound. This is a big problem. And it doesn't even matter whether or not it's fake or not. Doesn't matter if Ronald Reagan said these things or not. What matters is this is potential foreign interference on another country's justice system. That's serious business, folks. Now, we said there's more to the story. What do we mean by that? So an article dropped in the Globe and Mail earlier today, and it says the Ontario government is poised to pull anti-tariff ads running in the United States after they drew the ire of U.S. President Donald Trump, who said he would end trade negotiations. Pull them when, though? Ontario Premier Doug Ford had said the contentious ad is going ahead as planned on Friday. But you just said that they were being pulled. Okay, fine. A source told the Globe and Mail the ads have been locked in with television networks for the weekend, but Mr. Ford is expected to pull them on Monday. The source said the ads have been effective, and Mr. Trump's harsh reaction to them will garner the attention of millions of Americans. Mr. Trump abruptly canceled the talks late Thursday night after he became annoyed at ads featuring former President Ronald Reagan that were sponsored by the Ontario government. Mr. Carney spoke while boarding a plane for an Asian trip, where he is expected to see Mr. Trump in South Korea next week for the APEC summit, but did not take questions from reporters.
All right, good morning. Look, for months we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. And it's in that context that our officials, my colleagues, have been working with their American colleagues on detailed, constructive negotiations, discussions on specific transactions, specific sectors, steel, aluminum, and energy. And a lot of progress has been made. And we stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, because it will be for the benefit of workers in the United States, workers in Canada, and families in both of our countries. Now, what we can control, absolutely, is how we build here at home. And that's the focus of Budget 2025, generational investment here in Canada. And what we can also control, or at least heavily influence, is developing new partnerships and opportunities, including with the economic giants of Asia, which is the focus of this trip.
Control what we can control. Well, maybe you can control your country, Mark Carney, because this wasn't Donald Trump just flying off the handle unprovoked. What happened to your big happy relationship with Doug Ford? What happened to your fireside chat where you solved all the problems of the universe? That's what we heard about ad nauseum. Are you not buddies anymore? Do you guys not talk anymore? You trying to tell me he didn't tell you he was going to be running this ad? Are you really, really going to try and tell Canadians that that's what happened? We can't prove that he did, but I'm just going based on you. You're trying to say that you have this great relationship with Doug Ford because you went up to this cottage, expensive cottage, and you were up having a fireside chat, drinking booze, having cigars, getting all buddy-buddy. Your buddy didn't tell you he was going to run a $75 million ad against Donald Trump? Kind of find that hard to believe. Anyway, let's get back to this article because we're not done giving you the full story. Mr. Carney did not call on Mr. Ford to pull the ads. Isn't that interesting? The Ontario government has said it is spending $75 million on the entire ad campaign, which is running on major U.S. networks. Hear that, Ontario taxpayers? In a text message to the Globe and Mail, Mr. Ford said the ad campaign is still active. Quote, "I will be running the ad tonight for the World Series," end quote, the Premier said. Another source with connections to the Canadian and U.S. government said the president's displeasure at Canada isn't just aimed at the Ontario ads. This is the most important part in this entire article, folks. The source said U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has complained to the president that Canada had threatened to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he came to Canada. Mr. Rubio has informed the president that Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand had said that Beijing is considered a strategic partner of Canada at a time when the U.S. is in the midst of a trade war with the world's second biggest economy. The source said U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer also weighed in with the president on Canada's decision to impose tariffs on some vehicles imported by General Motors and Stellantis. This is where we get to the real crux of this, folks. Now, the ads may have just been the straw that broke the camel's back. Again, it's tantamount to foreign interference by Canada on the U.S. So that's number one. But one of the things that the US, and this is before Donald Trump, has been very concerned about in Canada is the fact that China can waltz into Canada and do whatever it wants. We had a whole public inquiry, for goodness sakes, on how China has been interfering in our elections prior to Donald Trump. We have lots of reporting from amazing investigative journalists like Sam Cooper, who document how China gets in. And there's even something called the Vancouver model. Not in a good way, where he explains how China uses real estate and casinos to get in, to influence people, to influence politicians, and then to get more people in. It's very, very concerning how easy China can influence this country. So that's one of the big concerns. The other one is that we have maintained this, I guess, standing arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. If he steps foot in Canada, we're going to arrest him. Well, I guess that's tantamount to Mark Carney's position on Hamas and Palestine, where he recognized them as a state. So, given the fact that this was before anything was given up, so you have that. So yeah, absolutely, it's going to be very concerning. Now, one of the main pieces in this article is it talks about the fact that Anita Anand has said that China is now a strategic partner of Canada's. So yeah, that's a bit concerning. But she was on Power and Politics the other day. This is what she said.
I know there's a new foreign policy under Prime Minister Carney than under the previous Prime Minister, and more focused on the real politics, the need to have a relationship with the two largest countries on earth. But there is some concern that big diplomatic issues are getting kind of pushed aside with that. I mean, what do you respond to people who are worried about just the nature of China and the relationship with India as well?
Well, if I could just address the first part of your question about our foreign policy, it's pragmatic, it's intentional, and it is based on ensuring that our diplomatic efforts abroad serve the domestic population here in our country. And so when we think about India and China and other relationships, we have to remember that it is necessary to raise issues of concern to the Canadian population. At the same time, we need to be pragmatic about our economic needs.
Right.
The relationships are complex. They shouldn't be grouped together. But make no mistake, we will not leave Canadian interests, such as public safety, such as foreign interference, unaddressed. We will make sure we have a process and a path to address those issues. At the same time, we will ensure that we are servicing the interests of the Canadian population writ large, especially in this time of economic stress.
Well, look, obviously we're not very different countries, very
Yes.
different issues. But let's start with China. One of the live pressing issues right now, obviously, the tariffs on canola, the tariffs on seafood, a retaliation to the EV tariffs that Canada brought in to have alignment with the United States. Was there any progress made in your conversations in China on resolving these particular issues?
So let's be clear that our trade with China at a bilateral basis is about $118 billion. They're our second largest trading partner. In terms of the specific sectors that you mentioned, I raised those sectors during our bilateral conversation, but the gist of the interaction and my effort there was to put on the table a strategic partnership framework so that whenever Canada has concerns, especially at a trade level, that it wishes to raise with China, we do so not on an issue-by-issue basis, but we do this in the context of a framework for the pragmatic, the constructive, the professional conversation that we need to have with our second largest trading partner.
Foreign interference be damned. Public safety be damned. They got lots of money. Now, I'm not naive. There's going to be some trade between China and literally every country in the world. But I take issue with the fact that Anita Anand says, oh, well, there's like over $110 billion bilateral trade agreement. Yeah, bilateral. Put the brakes on that. Let's see how much of that is actually benefiting Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, benefiting Canada, this is how much Canada exports to China. Okay? So up until 2024, which is that last column on the right, it was between $20.5 and $22 billion. So probably around $21 billion in 2024. Anita Anand is trying to say there's a bilateral trading relationship of $110 billion odd dollars. Okay, so that means that Canada only reaps the benefit of around 20% of that? That's not a lot. That's Canadian businesses earning money by shipping goods to China. So they're trying to frame this as, oh, well, there's all this money and we're getting tons of benefit of this. And don't get me wrong, billions of dollars, $1 billion is a lot of money. But when you're looking at this grand scheme to try to compare, and this is what they're trying to do, they're trying to convince Canadians that they can supplement all of the trade that we do with the United States with every other country, which I'm sorry, that's absolutely not correct. 80% of our trade is with the United States, which means 20% of our trade is with everybody else. So that's not going to happen. And it doesn't even make sense. You want to say that we're going to have the same trading relationship with countries that are across the Pacific and across the Atlantic as the same with the country that's on the same continent as we are. We're literally joined by a landmass. It's insane. And she's talking about we're forming a strategic partnership with China. Well, I want to call everybody back to something. And it was something that Mark Carney was asked way back on March 26th, 2025, 2 days after the election was called. Remember this?
First question's about these issues that Mr. Poilievre raised yesterday. He's suggesting you're beholden to China. He talked about your regular visits to China. You went there at the time when Xi was trying to show the world that he's open for business. You went back in the fall. Then Brookfield secured a $276 million loan for some property there. I guess that was underwater. Was that a sweetheart loan? Are you beholden to China?
Absolutely not. First thing. Second thing I'll say, look, Mr. Poilievre doesn't understand the world. Mr. Poilievre is a lifelong politician. It's all he's ever done. These slogans, sound bites, slander, doesn't understand how the world works. China happens to be our second largest trading partner. It's our second largest trading partner. We have trade disputes with China right now caused by them in the agriculture sector. It's one of the areas which we need to engage on. It's one of the areas, when you think about, again, the auto sector and the future of the auto sector, we've got to understand where China is, where China is going, whether or not there's any room for partnership in that. Look, I'm beholden to absolutely no one except to the Canadian people. I am here for the Canadian people. Sorry.
The Chinese ambassador's given, I think, 3 or 4 interviews in the last few weeks talking about his interest in reopening free trade talks. My question for you is, as we try to diversify away from the United States and reduce our reliance on our trade with the United States, is it your belief that we should be increasing our trade with China?
Look,
and reopening free trade talks.
Here's my view on this broader set of issues. We need to diversify our trade as a country. We are over-reliant on, as wonderful as the trade going across that bridge, we are over-reliant on the United States. I think it's a lesson we've all learned. We need to diversify. We want to diversify with like-minded partners. That's why I went to Europe in my first days as Prime Minister. Spoke first with European President von der Leyen, obviously met with the French President, and then separately, because it's not part of Europe anymore, as you know, the United Kingdom, in terms of building trade with them. There are partners in Asia that we can build deeper ties. There is certain activity that, but the partners in Asia that share our values don't include China.
Pardon me? There are partners in Asia that we can have deeper ties. but the partners that share our values don't include China. And fast forward 7 months. And here we have Anita Anand saying, we are forming a strategic partnership with China, the country that may be responsible for the most foreign interference and most harassing of our diaspora communities than any other country, from a state level. Goes back to that question. Mark Carney, are you beholden to China? Because the United States seems to think so. That's probably one of the reasons why they're so ticked off. Is because you're over there deepening your relationship with China. That's a problem because you haven't addressed the foreign interference aspect at all. But Anita Anand says, well, we're just putting those to the side. That's fine. There's money over there. We don't care about the fact that they're coming after our citizens. She tries to say, well, when there's a problem, we'll tell our citizens. When there's a problem, you don't even tell the MPs. Never mind the Canadian public. What are you trying to sell? That's what we learned in the last parliament. So no, I don't think so. But coming full circle, Mark Carney had to pay by dropping one of his taxes that he was going to put in order to sit back down at the bargaining table with Donald Trump and the U.S. the last time this happened. What the heck is going to be the price now? That's what Canadians are wondering. But the rest of us are wondering, where is this master negotiator that knew how to handle Donald Trump? Can someone tell me where he is? Because I think he's on vacation.